Welcome back to Bible Talk with Dave and Teresa. Today we're going to discuss Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. We've already went through Daniel chapter 1, and you can actually click that link later in this video to look at our playlist of all that to look at all that stuff with Daniel chapter 1 and what we saw when we read this book or this chapter. We are using the Christian Standard Bible version when we read this, so it's easier for you to follow along. So Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams that troubled him, and sleep deserted him. So the king gave orders to summon the magicians, mediums, and sorcerers, and all Chaldeans to tell him his dream. He said to them, "I had a dream, and anxious to understand it." The Chaldeans spoke to the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation." The king replied to the Chaldeans, "My word is final. If you do not tell me the dream and interpretation, you will be torn from limb to limb, and your house is made a garbage dump. But if you make the dream and its interpretation known to me, you'll receive its rewards and great honor from me. So make the dream and its interpretation known to me." They answered the second time, "May the king tell his servants, and he will make known the interpretation." The king replied, "I know for certain you are trying to gain some time because you know that my word is final. If you don't tell me the dream, there is one decree for you. You have conspired to tell me something false or fraudulent until the situation changes. So tell me the dream, and I will know you can give me its interpretation."
Smart king.
There's a couple of things that we're going to unpack here. Notice how it was when King did it, he called for all the chief magicians, the chief
advisors, enchanters, sorcerers, astrologers.
Notice who was not in that. Daniel and his friends were not called a part of that. So they weren't. So most likely these chiefs looked at Daniel and his friends with disgust and looked at them as, because they are not true Chaldeans, they can't be at higher ranking. That's a complete speculation, but that's what I would see them how they would look at Daniel, because we can confirm that Daniel and his friends weren't there because of what we'll see later. This was the chief's interpretations.
Yeah.
A little bit of history is needed here, because you see that in chapter 2, it states that King Nebuchadnezzar reigned in the dream, verses 1 through 5. And he was the one that ordered the chief Ashpenaz, chief eunuch, to find these young nobles that were already a part of the slaves. And that was the third year of Jehoiakim. What we have discovered, because we have so many Bibles in our house, we had to compare the Bibles because the timeline's off. Because you see that it said the second year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign. We know that Daniel and his friends were captive for 3 years. So what's going on? What's happening here? This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So basically what we have to do is we have to look at, history shows us that Nebuchadnezzar's father, Nabola, reigned from 626 BC until his death at 605 BC. Nebuchadnezzar reigned from 605 BC to 562 BC. To cut into the sections of David's, with the Bible of David, we can gather that the Babylonian timeline and the Jerusalem timeline are two different timelines. That's the confusion. So we're seeing the Jewish timeline and the Babylonian timeline are conflicting, and it makes sense because that's just back then Babylonians have their own timelines, but even nowadays we can see that there's a big difference because I know the Muslims have a different timeline than we do. They use a different standard, Jewish calendar.
It's two different calendars.
But if you also look, there's also another calendar that you're realizing too that the Jewish calendar is 13 months. We use 12 months. So I can actually go. That will be another section of the Bible where I talk about time change, but that's later. But you can already see that the timelines are very different, and it's based off of Jewish timeline and Babylonian timeline. that's where we're having this little bit of a dilemma of the reign. Now, speculators believe, and I heard this from a pastor a while back, that what it was King Nebuchadnezzar was most likely a prince during this time when he ordered the chief eunuch to get the people that he wanted to become like higher up, knowing that his father is, going to pass away. And it would make sense because King Nebuchadnezzar went to go fight Judah and get the slaves that he needed, which meant that his father had to remain in Babylon to make sure that the rule was being sufficed accordingly. But yet he still referred to himself as king. So you could speculate that that could actually have happened during his father's reign when he actually ordered for Chief Ashpenaz to get the people from slavery that had the good looking to teach them for 3 years. That Chief Nebuchadnezzar was preparing himself when his father did pass and he took full reign. So he was probably just more like a prince during that time, but still considered himself a king. So that can be speculated as well. There's a lot of things that could always be speculation. All we know is what Daniel says. Theologians we'll have to see what archaeology says or anything else like that. But we do know that through history, archaeology, and all that stuff, Babylonians did exist. We do know their timeline and the Jewish timeline are two very different things, which explains the confusion in some of this.
Yeah, there are books, articles written on the different timelines, the calendars, the systems. It I guess if you're into that kind of thing, it's extremely fascinating. But for the most part,
It's flustering.
It can be very flustering because it's just so detailed about all the calendar systems. And if I remember, I think the Babylonians had a couple of calendar time systems that they used, not just one like we do. So, yeah, that's why. And it's kind of maddening because the Bible doesn't specifically say that. But yeah, it was written from a Jewish perspective. So that's the kind of confusion cleared up. It's basically there were multiple calendar systems used back then.
And sometimes you'll hear people talk about why the Bible is wrong because of this. Well, the Bible is not wrong. It has to do with the timelines. People use different timelines. The Bible's not wrong.
You just have to dig a little.
It just means that there's different timelines that are used, and he's trying to use it the best way he can based off of his knowledge. Like Daniel used the third reign of King Jehoiakim when he was taken, so then you use the Jewish calendar. But on this one where he says the second year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, now we're going to use the Babylonian calendar. That's what we're seeing, that you have to switch between the two of them to understand it. He doesn't say the year, he says the reigns. And that's what we have to use to understand. So it didn't lie, it's just talking about different reigns. But that also, because he didn't lie and you're seeing these two different reigns, it proves the integrity and the honesty of the Bible because we're seeing this conflict and this difference. But based off of this, then we can also assume that Daniel, this is where we can actually see that Daniel and his friends were most likely 15 years of age when they were taken. So they were teenagers. So the other thing I want you to see is that King Nebuchadnezzar did not tell the magicians or anybody else his dream. He basically said, use telepathy, tell me what my dream was, because if you can't, then you don't know diddly squat, period. And they basically, and they're right, nobody can interpret your mind. That is one of the wonderful blessings that God gives us, is we're able to speak to him with our mind. He can hear our thoughts and our hearts. Others can't. Demons can't. Nobody can. That's between him and us. That is another reason why I can basically state that anybody who says that it's a speaking tongues and they do the hooba da booba mockery.
The gobbledygook.
The gobbledygook that's exactly what it is. It's gobbledygook. God, we'll get into that in another one when we're going into the New Testament. Because it's completely different. But to give you a side note,
talking about the tongues.
Speaking in tongues has nothing to do about speaking in gobbledygook. It has everything to do with speaking another language. Like if I speak English, but I need to speak to somebody who's Italian and doesn't know English, then that would be speaking in tongues. They're speaking Italian so they can understand the Bible, but the interpreter has to be there to know what is being said. That is tongues. Completely taken out of context and everything else like that, but we'll see that when we get to the Bible. All right, so we know that the only way that you're going to be able to see this true wisdom, true anything, is only through God. We see that in the book of Proverbs. I don't know exactly where in Proverbs, but I do know Proverbs basically states that wisdom is given to God's children from God. So wisdom is only derived to us from God by God. That's how we receive it. Anybody else who does not actually fear God, he says in the Bible, does not have true wisdom. True wisdom comes from fearing God. And if you want to take that a little further, because unfortunately we have butchered what fearing God means. It really means like we hold God in reverence, high authority. We have reverence for him. We love him. We respect him. Kind of like a loving father. You respect your loving father. I know that there are fathers out there who are not so loving, so that's why I want to be specific about a loving father. You respect him, you love him, and you understand that you don't want to disrespect him due to the discipline that would come afterwards. That's what he means by fear God. The reason why we're going more into like talking a little bit further about God and wisdom and everything else like that is because you're seeing how the magicians and the Chaldeans and the mediums, how they actually answered King Nebuchadnezzar. They were right. Nobody knows how to do this. And then they said, tell us your dream, which means that, most likely, and I believe, I give King Nebuchadnezzar, kudos on this one. I can tell somebody something and then they can interpret it any way they want. Doesn't mean it's actually true.
Yeah.
So that's that's actually what's happening. King Nebuchadnezzar is saying, no, if I tell you my dream, how do I know that you're just going to interpret it any way you want and it's true? It's not. Just because I might want it to be true doesn't mean it is. Just because I might want it to be false doesn't mean it is. I have to know the true meaning of what this is, and only God can give us that. And that's why I was going off on that little tangent to kind of show you where that true wisdom comes from, is because they can't answer him. They don't have that wisdom. They're looking at their false gods for this, not our true God. So, if you want to actually see what Daniel chapter 1 is all about, you can click here for our playlist. Next time we're going to go into Daniel chapter 2 verses 10 through 23, and we actually see how Daniel reacts to this. Until next time, you have a blessed day. Bye.
Bye.